Hi everyone, welcome back to how to create a yoga practice at home, one pose at a time. Last time we met, we worked on transitioning from downward facing dog to the parallel plank. And today we're going to transition from downward facing dog to the diagonal plank. So we'll start with some warm-ups and then I'll demonstrate the difference between the two planks, and then we'll go into the details of getting into to diagonal plank. So for starters, let's start by collecting and gathering ourselves. So you're going to want to sit on some surface if you need assistance in maintaining your neutral spine. So I just find a few blankets underneath my sitting bones is helpful for that. If you're comfortable on a flat floor, that's fine as well. And so what you're going to start to do is we'll just gather ourselves. So you close your eyes, you'll rest your hands wherever is comfortable. Start with some deep breaths, inhaling through your nose and exhaling through your mouth. Letting go of any tensions or worries that have built up throughout your day. And bringing your focus to your breathing. If it's useful and easier to be aware of your breathing, a hand at your sternum and a hand on your low belly will help you to feel the movement of your body that responds to your inhales and your exhales. On an exhale, release the deep breaths and keep watching your breath, noticing as it returns to its natural rhythm. And continue to observe. And then bring your hands into Namaste. Take a generous inhale. And as you exhale, release your head towards your fingertips. Release your hands. Inhale your head up and gently open your eyes. From here, we're going to pivot the pelvis over the femurs, keeping the neutral lumbar spine. Have some fingers in your hip crease. Exhale as you pivot forward. Inhale as you pivot back up. When we talked about preparing for the parallel plank, we talked about the idea of crown of the head moving up while the tailbone moves down. It's really more of an intention than an actual movement, but you want to continue that same idea here. So as you're exhaling forward, the ends of the spine are opposing one another, if you will. Thinking of elongation while the neutral curves of your spine are in place. The next time you are upright, you're going to inhale your arms up to parallel, and then you're going to spiral the scapula so that they widen across your back, and then keeping your hands parallel, inhale your arms up to Urdhva Hastasana. Only going as high as you can continue to maintain those neutral lumbar curves. Take a few breaths here. Exhale, release. Stretch your legs out and change the cross. And continue the same movement on the other side. Exhaling forward. Inhaling up. Top and bottom end of the spine in opposition for a sense of elongation. This time when you come up, start with your arms in the same position. Spiral the scapula to widen them across your back. Inhale up. Cross your forearms. You can clasp your elbows, your forearms, or your wrists. And then reach the elbows toward the ceiling. Inhale up. Exhale, change the cross. So whether your forearms are bent and your elbows are reaching, or you're in Urdhva Hastasana and your fingertips are reaching up, you can think of them as an extension of your spine, moving in the same direction as the crown of your head. Exhale, release. Move your props out of the way. And now I have blankets today, more yoga style blankets, but you can always use regular blankets or towels folded up. Come to lay on your back, spine in its neutral curve, lumbar spine in particular, and start by inhaling one leg up to a straight leg, exhaling and releasing while you take the other leg up. So alternating to a straight extended leg, looking for a stretch on the back chain of the legs, hamstrings, calves. Note that, as we've said before, if this is the place where your leg can be straight, that's where you're going to keep it. If you can manage to keep your lumbar curve in neutral and keep the straight leg, then you go wherever that is possible so that you get the best stretch on the back of your leg. You can also start to make this a little bit more of a flowing movement. Whatever feels right in order to warm up your legs. When you come back to the first leg, you'll bend it and circle your ankle about 5 times in each direction. And then straighten the leg, press through your heel to flex your ankle, and press through the ball of your foot to extend your ankle. And about 5 times going through ankle flexion and ankle extension, noticing how the stretch in your leg changes depending on the position of your ankle. You'll do the same thing on the other side, bent knee, ankle circles. And then straightening the leg, flex and extend, flex and extend. Evening yourself out, bringing both feet down, roll over to one side, and come up to hands and knees. If you like the idea of evening out the difference in height from your shoulder to the floor and your hip to the floor, then you can be up on blankets. You can also be on blankets if you need a little cushioning up for your knees. From here, neutral spine, initiating all movement from the pelvis, and still thinking about that elongation along the spine. Inhale into extension. Head is the last thing that comes up. Exhale into flexion. Head is the last thing to drop. extension, flexion, articulating along all the vertebra of your spine is another great way to warm up for pretty much any pose. The next time you're in extension, you're going to keep your spine in extension, glide your hips in the direction of your heels, going only as far as you can maintain the extended curve in your spine. Inhale up, round into flexion, back to extension, and glide the hips back. Notice that the movement is all in the spine. As I'm coming into flexion especially, I want it to be only about the spine right now. This time when I glide the hips back, I am going to let my spine curve and come off the blocks, or the blankets, and come to child's pose, wherever your child's pose is. Child's pose is always a great place to rest, and you're welcome to stop and rest in child's pose whenever you need it. From here, we're going to straighten the arms and spiral the scapula again to widen them across your back. Reach out as far as you can for a straight arm. Rock up to hands and knees, tuck your toes under, lift your hips up and back. So this is kind of a 3-pose warm-up. I like to call it zigzag pose. Getting yourself a little bit more ready to come to downward facing dog. The next time you're in the bent knee, downward facing dog, otherwise known as squatty dog, you're going to start to straighten one leg at a time, stretching the hamstrings and the calves, evening yourself out. You'll then straighten your legs to downward facing dog. Take a few breaths here. Bend your knees and come to child's pose. So last time we went from child's pose to from downward facing dog to parallel plank. That looked like this. So the center of my shoulder joint and the center of my hip joint are level. So my torso is more or less kind of sort of parallel with the floor. To get to diagonal plank, it's a little bit different. I'm going to show you what diagonal plank looks like, and then we'll discuss the technicalities of getting there. So you can see the difference in diagonal plank. The hips are lower than the shoulders. So to start out, I'd like to get a little bit more of an idea of how to round the spine. So coming up on some height makes this a little bit easier You come back to that starting position that we did before. This time it's going to be about the whole spine. So from here, we're going to inhale. As we exhale, we'll tuck the chin to the chest. Lift the pelvic floor, draw the lower abdominals in toward the spine, and continue to round up. Coming and creating a nice C shape, if you will. So notice when we were articulating through the spine that we didn't get the arms and the shoulders involved, but now we do. Inhale, exhale, chin to the chest. Lift the pelvic floor, you can't really see that. Lift the abdominals toward the spine and round the spine. And now I am pushing my hands into the floor so I can get broad across the upper back. The other thing I didn't mention is we're still getting those nice spiraled scapula so that they can be wide across my back. Let's do 2 more. So now, how can we do the same thing in downward facing dog? Spiral my scapula, get them wide across my back from the start. Rock up and tuck under, downward facing dog. Now from here, it's going to be one added piece. I'm going to inhale. As I exhale, I tuck my chin to my chest. I'm wide across my upper back. I lift my heels off the floor and then lift my pelvic floor, then pull my belly button towards my spine, then round up. I'm leading with the center of my upper back to come forward into the diagonal plank. So my head, crown of my head and my tailbone, and to a certain extent my heels are reaching in opposite directions. To come out, I tuck my chin to my chest, I exhale audibly, and I use my abdominals to push me back to downward facing dog. So once again, downward facing dog. Inhale. As I exhale, chin to chest, come high on the mounds of my toes, lift my pelvic floor, draw my low abdominals in, lead with my upper back, unfurl myself so my head is the last thing to come up into the pose. Inhale, exhale, tuck my chin to my chest, exhale, push myself back. It's really the abdominals that are driving that backward movement from diagonal plank to downward facing dog. Let's do that 2 more times. and down to child's pose. One fun thing that you might want to try, once you've got a good sense of the transition from downward facing dog to diagonal plank, is to make a little sequence out of the two planks with downward facing dog in between. I like to call it the teeter-totter. I come up to downward facing dog, draw my head forward, rock forward, parallel plank, tip my tailbone up to come back to downward facing dog. Inhale, exhale, tuck my chin, lift my heels, use my core, come forward to diagonal plank, tuck my chin, exhale, back to downward facing dog, draw my gaze forward, parallel plank, tuck my tailbone up, downward facing dog, back to diagonal plank. And so on and so on. Obviously, we're building our practice one pose at a time, so there's no need to do that, but if you wanted to challenge yourself, that would be a good place to do it. So let's move to our backs to cool down. Lying in such a way that our spine is in neutral. Extend your arms. Take your feet as wide as your sticky mat. And windshield wiper your knees side to side. Letting your head move in the opposite direction of your knees so you get a little bit of a twist along your spine. Inhaling up, exhaling, going side to side. Notice that my legs never touch the floor, so there's no real resting. And I'm keeping my movements slow and synchronized with my breath. So my exhale is completed at about the same time that my knees come into their final position. And my inhale is completed at about the same time my knees and head come to center. And I even myself out before I finish in the center. Draw my knees in, rock side to side. Extend one leg out. And then the other, alternating. Reaching the legs away from me. Bringing both knees in, thighs toward the chest, and taking my knees wide, clasping just below my knee or at my shins or ankles, bringing the soles of my feet together, keeping my neutral lumbar curve. Take a couple of breaths here. Bring my knees together and my feet flat on the floor. And begin to come into Shavasana. So you can take your feet wide and let your knees support one another and come and start your Shavasana here. or you can go right ahead into a straight extended leg. If it was useful for you to have a hand on your chest and a hand on your belly at the warm-up, maybe it will be useful here as well as you bring your attention back to your breath. Staying in Shavasana with your attention on your breathing for as long as you'd like. And when you've completed your Shavasana, bend your knees. Roll over to one side and use a hand or an arm to support your head. Take a breath here and then use your hands and the weight of your top leg to bring yourself back up to a seated position. So that is the transition from downward facing dog to diagonal plank. I hope that you enjoyed this episode of how to create a home yoga practice one pose at a time. Namaste.